Audience.
Super.
So that's just us three as the chairman that is going to sort out the precept and everything else of the town.
No,
Good.
we do not have that gift. We are only here to recommend to full council. So, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on this special finance meeting being held Wednesday, the 4th of January. We're starting just a moment after 6 o'clock. We'll head straight to the first item on the agenda, which is declarations of any disclosable pecuniary interest to receive any additional interest not already registered. Now, obviously, if anything should come up during the course of the proceedings, please do feel free to declare. We then go on to the next one, which is apologies for absence. Karen, have we received any, please?
We've received none.
Thank you. Okay, so we move on to the substantive item on the agenda, which is the budget for the 2023-24 financial year. So as you will recall at our previous full council meeting, full council decided that the finance committee would revise the budget to ensure that the precept would not increase by more than 20%. There were a number of ideas put forward at that meeting, and they have all been considered and reviewed. There was a suggestion that we increase perhaps the property rental tenancy rate to 100%, but given current economic climate, we felt that was inappropriate, and there is one part of our property portfolio that is unable to be occupied at this point in time, so we couldn't physically do that. So the purpose of the paper that has been circulated previously is to make a recommendation to yourselves, and then should you choose to do so, to make that recommendation to full council. We cannot make a decision on the budget or precept. By law, that is a full council decision. So the revised budget that has been circulated incorporates the changes requested and now also includes a summary of reserves, as I felt that was incredibly important. So as stated in the report, as I mentioned previously, one part of our portfolio is the former art gallery. Sadly, the windows there require extensive work and it is uninhabitable, as it were, at this point in time, and unleasable. So we will have to obviously get those works done before we can realise its true potential. So therefore, we have not recommended that property rentals increases be incorporated into the 2023-24 budget. However, increasing rentals should be pursued from an operational perspective, and obviously if successfully rented out, the monies received should be used to fund other initiatives or to restore maintenance or other specific purpose reserves, but that can be addressed during the monitoring in year of said budget. What we have done is basically look at the contributions to reserves and the personnel budget. An element of vacancy assessment has been undertaken, and realistically we are unlikely to fill all of the vacancies that we may have because of just standard turbulence within the workforce. So there has been an adjustment made there, but the main adjustment has been done via reducing the contributions to reserves. In the long term, that principle is not sustainable to this council. The reason is that the reserves fund most of the council's projects and ongoing works, larger maintenance projects, that kind of thing. And at the current rate of project expenditure, which is running at around £250,000 to £300,000 per annum, the reserves will be eroded within 4 years if no further contributions are made. What I would say is at this point in time, we are still making contributions to reserves. They're just not at what we initially recommended as a committee previously. The council has had to set aside £25,000 to pay for the elections in May 2023. That is based on all seats and the additional 2 seats that will be coming into our area being, what's the word I'm looking for? Challenged, up for election. Obviously, if there are not enough candidates and an election doesn't take place, obviously there won't be that expense, but actually that is the worst case scenario, so we have to budget appropriately for it. At present, there is approximately 16,000 in the election cost reserve, and an initial 9,000 has therefore been budgeted in 23-24 to ensure that that liability can be funded. Obviously, should those seats not be contested, that was the word I was looking for, that would remain some money within those reserves, but obviously that then is there for should any by-elections crop up, which we have had a number of in this previous 4-year term. In addition, at least 6,250 will also need to be made annually thereafter to ensure that the reserve will be sufficient in 2027. So that actually explains the £15,250 contribution to reserves next year. So it is therefore recommended that an overall reduction in the contribution to reserves be made of £45,541. That has been equally and proportionately allocated to all the reserve contributions that we identified at our previous meeting. So I've tried, my recommendation to the officer was to be fair and equitable. So if we are reducing property repairs, office equipment, the St Peter's contribution and play parks renewal, that they were all done equally and proportionately. Council may need to prioritise its activities should there be consideration to further reductions to the contributions of reserves. As I mentioned, there's the additional savings in salaries. It's anticipated that a reduction of 4% in the original budgeted salaries can be achieved through staffing changes that typically occur in any organisation. This is prudent as it is extremely unlikely that all positions will be filled in every month of the year. Furthermore, when the original salaries budget was prepared, the final settlement for staff salaries for 2021-22 had not been finalised. So using the latest staff costs as the base for next year means that the original budgeted salaries should be marginally lower. With that overview, I will move to the recommendations as they stand at the moment, and then I will open the floor for discussion if that's okay. So should you choose as the Finance Committee to accept these changes and recommend them to full council, the council can continue to operate on a sustainable basis because ultimately we have not changed, apart from that aspect of the personnel budget, we have not changed any of the commitments that the committees have made in their operational budgets in terms of contracts, in terms of obligations, in terms of plans and that side of things. As instructed and requested by full council, the precept increase would be 20% on a Band D property, and therefore the precept for a Band D property will be £154.63 per year for a Band D property, which is up from £128.86. That is the basis of the recommendation. I will open the floor for discussion, please. Yes, Barbara.
We find ourselves in a difficult position, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, but as we are, I think we are where we are, and that's the way it's got to go. But I think we're going to be like most households this year, keep our fingers crossed and hope no emergencies arise. I would like to have the reserves reduced for more than a year, but as it is, I think that for this year, it's a unfortunate necessity.
Thank you. Chris?
I find it difficult. I mean, I must agree with what's happening. I can see with hindsight, it's a wonderful thing, and we all think back to what we did and stuff, but it's what it is, and it's where we are. We've been hit with things we never thought we'd get. The pandemic, Putin invaded Ukraine, the price of fuel, etc., etc. The increase in staff costs, which are covered with the price, with the wage increases, etc., which ties in with the pensions and everything else that goes with it. And we have to maintain our services. And to be fair, I mean, as you know, I'm not a great fan of putting the fee, but £26 a year. Well, that is per month. My brain's gone numb now. I'm really sorry. It's for what we do.
It's just over £2 per month, isn't it?
And I don't know if it's relevant, but, and I don't know if it's the right time to ask, but would the fact that Kingfleet come onto the stream next year, will that make life easier?
There could be a change in our council tax base because there could be increased properties taken into consideration in that council tax base. Obviously, it won't hit us for this year because we've had the council tax base figures. However, it could, but that is also dependent on the occupants of those properties and also theoretically their occupation rates. And I'm mindful that obviously the housing industry is also facing its own challenges given what's going on economically. So I think to go, yeah, we'll be getting loads more houses and loads more council tax isn't potentially an answer. And again, we will have to deal, let me rephrase that, this council will have to deal with the information that's available to them at that point in time, as we always have done. Councillor Brain.
I disagree entirely that we should have a bugger about with our reserves. They're for the future, they ain't for us. We should be looking at where we can save more costs. My question would be to Alan, are we contracted for hanging baskets next year? Because if we are, I'd like to know why, because that's outside of this 4-year council budget. I would also like to know if we're contracted for Christmas lights next year. Again, why we would have signed a contract putting us responsible for after our term, and that is a £40,000 saving in our costs if we weren't going to pay such silly money for those projects. And to be honest, if you say to people today who are worried about heating or eating, my question would be, why do you want hanging baskets in your flipping high street? Wouldn't you rather save money at home? Equally, there is nothing stopping us. We're going to have festoon lighting up in the market square. I have no problem with putting a Christmas tree up and putting some lights on it. I have no problem with a Christmas do where we actually charge stall holders and other types of people and fair rides to be in our high street for the Christmas ride at a cost of nil to Thetford Town Council. Equally, we pay £10,000 a year to sit in this room, and I would ask why. We could have exactly the same amount of room in the buildings that we own in the Carnegie and Guildhall at no cost, and save another £10,000 a year. So 26,000 for lights, 12,000 for watering the baskets, and £10,000 for here. Saves us all the money we need to save. And if you work it out, I worked it out very roughly because I'm not a mathematician, but with those savings, the preset would only need to go up by 18%, not 20.
But then that would negate your comment regarding messing around with the contributions to reserves.
None of that would vary with the contributions to reserve. We would put the same money we've always put in reserve. We don't, putting money into reserves is for the future. I'm talking about taking out of the budget of next year. We don't have it in there, that is part of the reserves.
So in terms of the Christmas light contract, I believe that was a 3-year one, and we've just completed the 2nd year of that one. So we are contractually obliged to next year on that. It's always been a standing 3-year, but obviously that is a decision that is made at that time, and that sits within the amenities budget lines.
What's the cost of council?
Good question, well asked. Don't have that information available to us. Can I suggest that Alan provides that information to all councillors prior to the special meeting.
Yeah.
Well, provides it to all councillors, full stop, I think is the simplest one.
And the same would go for the watering of the hanging basket.
I can comment in terms
Yeah.
of the hanging baskets. What we were hit with two things. One is that there was a substantial increase in the contractor costs because their costs, they had actually under budgeted when they did the initial proposal. So what they're proposing now is still way below the prices that the competitors tendered 3 years ago. The Amenities Committee and Councillor Tollett, as part of that, will confirm that we're actually having a meeting where we're looking at how do we manage that contract. The only difficulty we have is that those meetings will take place in January, February. We don't have the luxury of time for the budget. So, but it is something that is on the agenda, and I think Councillor Tollett has made comments herself as to hanging baskets, for example.
Baskets, yes, but you don't notice them. That was my comment.
For me, it is before we start saying we're not going to put money into reserves, they are savings that basically saves us a lot of money for nothing, because it really doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know how many people here have, if you live in a town where the main road goes through the town, so all of the passing trade drives through your town and sees your high street, then I believe it's the council's job to make that very attractive. Plants, planters, the whole bit. At Christmas, they need to see that you're alive and thriving with Christmas lights. The only people that walk down Thetford High Street live here. So with all of the problems that we're having in the next year, why do they want to see it lit up at night? And the last 4 times I've walked down there after 8 o'clock, there's been 3 people. So we're lighting up the whole of King Street every night. Do you know that Blackpool Illuminations closed down on the 2nd of January? We're still doing it. It don't make sense. The cost that we're paying, and we're going to cut reserves for the future instead of looking at your bloody cloth and saying we do not need hanging baskets this year and we don't need Christmas lights for next Christmas. Guess what? If the gas prices come down and everything else happens and it all changes, we're in a position to say, hey, we'll do Christmas. Hey, we'll do summer. But at this moment in time, we should be looking at saving all of that money plus this place, taking it off the preset. And then, as I say, my workings out is the preset would go up about 18% and not 20%.
So is that including adding the reserves back to the original contribution levels?
Yes.
So are you proposing an amendment to the proposed budget whereby we reinstate the original reserve contributions and remove, pending guidance on contractual implications, the removal of £21,000 in hanging basket costs budgeted, £18,500 budgeted in Christmas light costs, and £10,000 in, what's the word I'm looking for? King's House facilities line.
Yep.
Sorry, just trying to be really specific in terms of the budget lines that we're looking at, so it's transparent.
Ones I looked at and said this would be a way of saving.
Okay. Chris, are you seconding that proposal?
No, am I allowed to comment on what Roy
You may comment, but I have a live proposal and I'm ready to go find a seconder.
the clarify some stuff first? I mean, I thought I was the Grinch, but I mean, it's strange. On amenities, we have decided to cut down the number of hanging baskets by half. So possibly your figures aren't quite right because we have decided to do away with every other one. King Street, I do.
We're budgeted at 21,000.
Yeah, but this is, I think, what I mean is,
Hasn't been decided and there is still a contract in place.
in my opinion is that times are hard. People want cheering up. People get really depressed and fed up. And to walk through Main Street at Christmas time and to see lights brightens people's moods. And to see the hanging baskets, we're part of Anglia in Blue. We did really well. We could do better.
Yeah, we didn't. We spent a bloody fortune entering. We only entered 2 or 3. We didn't do any better than anywhere else. Yeah, that's the same as bloody crust. So we come, you got a silver medal. Now, unless you get gold, unless you get on the telly, waste of bloody time.
The only thing I do agree with, Roy, is coming out here. And I've always thought that this, since everything else is in Carnegie, I've always said that we should have moved this across as well. But that's the only thing I agree with.
Hands up, I don't like Christmas. I'm a boo-ha humbug. I think that if the taxpayer have paid for those lights, they're the ones who are seeing them, not somebody just coming through the town. And it does have a, that Father Christmas, without the lights, it just wouldn't have been the same event. So we are contracted for another year for the lights. Hanging baskets, not either here or there. You think, wow, when they go up, and then you forget to see them the rest of the time. And the main cost is watering. And if we have another summer like that, I think they're a waste of time. I think more impact should be on the planters. With regards to this room, I don't know where you would put it in the Guildhall or the Carnegie, because the acoustics, yeah, are terrible. I struggle to hear. And if you move this to permanently there, are you then restricting a room you can't let out? I don't know. I don't know enough about.
Yes, it's the easy answer.
Yeah. So to me, £10,000, but it's permanently set up. There's no having to take it down, move it, and you can hear what people say. And also, yeah. I don't know if that's feasible or not, but for £10,000, it could be looked at. But I think the Christmas lights are a bonus for the town, and
Not saying.
maybe they should be cut back on times and whatever. But I'm one of those 3 people that walk through
Actually,
the town at
frankly,
night time.
times are irrelevant because this town council does not pay for any of the electricity bills. It comes from the goodwill of the properties that the electricity. Oh crikey, I've lost my teeth now. The electricity is plugged into.
I think the shop owners would be quite disappointed we didn't put them up, because I think they made you think that.
I have a conflict of interest there, so I'm not going to comment.
Well, to say, I've been a shop owner, waste of space, waste of time, cost me money to bloody put the electricity into it. Nobody looks at it.
Okay,
And the Christmas night, where you have Father Christmas, and the best one we had was when we had all the stalls up King Street and everything else. Nobody looked at the lights. They looked at the stalls and the people and the bus.
Yeah, but you're aware of them.
I stand corrected on a factual matter that I need to bring to your attention.
We have 4 meter points for our Christmas lights.
Yeah, which we pay for.
We pay for,
Yeah.
so.
But the other ones, well, it always was that, I know as a shop owner, I paid for it.
So I'm really focused on decision making this evening. So we have a live amendment to the initial recommendation, which I need to deal with first. So Councillor Brain's amendment is that we reinstate the figures for the transfers to reserves. And that is contrary with the removal of the contract for the Christmas lights at 21,000, the removal of the hanging baskets contract at 18,500, and the use of the King's House facilities at £10,000 within those budget lines, pending contractual implications advice.
Yeah.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Then I'm sorry, Councillor Brain. That one's dead in the water. So we go back to the substantive, which is the original one on the table. Anybody really feels free to wiggle it, do so, because that is where we are. So The budget before you is the substantive motion. We're going back to that. The recommendation is that we make the adjustments in terms of the personnel budget and those reductions to contributions to reserves. Do I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Barbara. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Chris. All those in favour? I'm going to vote that through. The reason being is I think this requires further discussion, and I think it's absolutely appropriate that you bring back up your points in that full council discussion, please and thank you. And if we could look at those potential contractual implications.
I meant
So,
to get him to ask you that beforehand.
so that all of that, I don't want to lead you, but I think it's a valid thing that the whole council needs to consider. So that is carried. Those recommendations will be made to full council. The council meeting is an extraordinary one that is scheduled for 5:30.
It's fine.
5:30, Tuesday the 10th, before the planning meeting. We've given ourselves an hour with a half-hour break.
Your coffee.
It is in the gift of the council now. Thank you all very, very much for your time, and thank you for the robust discussion that we've had.